Good morning.
Good morning. It's February 11th, 2021. Welcome aboard. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast, and we're actually episode 451. We shorted ourselves on Tuesday.
Shortchanged.
We didn't have time to celebrate and, put a banner up and throw some confetti and celebrate podcast 450. So we skipped that one. We're here at 451. It's a nasty, rainy, gloomy day here in Chattanooga, but we hope you are getting some sunshine wherever you are, even though I know for most of you, it is just straight cold right now. One of our athletes from the most western part of Canada sent me a screenshot this morning with I think it was like feels like negative 43. And I was like, that's not even, that's just flat out unacceptable.
What a gift.
No thanks, right? What a gift. Oh, just got to
cold exposure gift.
Yeah, it is.
Watch your extremities.
It's cold. Seriously, watch your extremities. Layer up or just, flat out stay inside. Put the fire on, read a book, do something, take care of yourself. But yeah, welcome aboard. We appreciate you tuning in. Again, this is the Crushing Iron Podcast. We are episode 451 today. We come to you twice a week. Traditionally, Mondays and Thursdays, but always twice a week, and we have for what's, I guess, going on about 5 years now. Mike and I, as both coaches and athletes, cover all sorts of topics. We cover triathlon. We cover a whole lot of life. Sometimes we'll dive deep into swim, bike, and run training. We'll do race recaps. We'll do race previews. We've had on 4 guests, something like that over the course of our 451 podcasts. But for the most part, Mike and I just sit back, relax, and have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through personally, what maybe our athletes are going through. Sometimes, at least maybe 1 or 2 times a month, we'll hop into our Facebook group, which you can search Crushing Iron Group. Hop in there, answer one simple question. We'll let you in. A lot of awesome people in there. A lot of topics are brought up, and I think especially as the season starts to progress and races begin clicking off here in April, that you're going to see the conversation kind of pick the amount of conversations they're picking up, as you will, I think, in pretty much across the sport in general. So hop in there. A lot of awesome people in there, from beginners to professionals and everyone in between. Don't be afraid to ask questions and kind of pop in. And it's kind of it's always the vibe of our podcast, really. It's like the vibe of our community and what we try to talk about each day. And hopefully you can take something that we have today and apply it to your life. Have some fun, stay happy and healthy, and then we're going to have our first ad today in rich roll fashion. No, I'm just kidding. We have no sponsors. We have no ads. We have one agenda to keep you happy and healthy. I said that because someone posted one of Rich Roll's podcasts in our closed group yesterday, Nicole Winger. And a couple people said, yeah, I can't really do Rich Roll because I'm so spoiled with the Crushing Iron guys because they don't do any ads. And I said, well, yeah, but you guys fast forward through our first 15 minutes anyway. We just don't get paid for it.
I don't know. I think people like the first 15. It's sort of that guilty pleasure that people might have.
It's the blooper reel at the end of the end of a movie. It's like, yeah, I love the blooper, all the outtakes. This for our first 15 minutes are the outtakes. You never know what's going to happen.
I got to say, man, other than going to bed and waking up, I don't think I've done anything twice a week for the last 5 years.
I haven't done. I have, but
that consistently.
This is,
we've done a lot of podcasts.
We have done a lot. We'll be
second nature, really.
It is.
Know what I mean? It's like,
we need to look up and see what the date is going to be for our 500.
Do we really care?
I feel like we will. 500's a lot.
It is a lot, but man, think about it like it's just another day. It's day one. Today's just a new day.
Is that 25 weeks from now?
That's how you don't get there with that kind of stuff floating out there. You just kind of get to the grind.
Rain on my parade. So
Let's
grumpy.
Just celebrate and rent out a hall.
I didn't say we had to rent anything. I'm just saying, let's see if it falls, on a pretty cool date like it did 2 years ago when it was at Ironman, Wisconsin. We had episode 300.
I know. Well, we have a lot of engineers in the group. They should be able to figure this out.
Yeah, seriously, we'll have a spreadsheet with all the analytics and stuff broken down. Yeah, options we can have. So that's what we got. So we appreciate you tuning in. If you haven't, it's like your first few episodes, dig on back. Mike does a really awesome job of outlining with descriptions, the topics we cover, and all of the podcasts. So go back. You can either pick and choose from them or just go in order and pick your way through 1 to 451. You have a topic for today?
I was just going to ask if you wanted to go out on a limb and title today's podcast right now.
Ooh, before we started?
Yeah. Do you have it?
God. No, I'm the worst at that. That's your thing. That's your thing.
It is.
I'm the worst at it.
I hear it as I go, but it definitely feels today like I'm a author sitting down at a typewriter with a blank page. That's kind of how we do it sometimes. It's sort of like that blank page, and it's exciting.
Before you get
free,
how many pairs of Hokas do you have? We do this live now. He's got these. I swear to God, you have like 19 pairs of Hokas. How many you got? You're coming like a shoe guy. You're a gadget guy. You're a shoe guy. How many pairs you got?
Come on, man. It's only 3.
You got 3 pairs of Hokas.
I bought the Speed Goats, which changed my plantar fasciitis, or really helped me get over it.
Yeah, for the good.
For the trail.
Sponsored by Hoka.
Sponsored by Hoka. And that really went well. So then I'm like, well, I'm going to get some roads. Get some roadies. and
these are the new
that
pair,
worked
right?
out pretty well. And then we went to run camp, and I'm like, okay, well, I got to do the polar plunge. It could be muddy. I might want to get a pair of backups. So these are my backups, which have not been on trails yet.
Right, and you
I'm
have
kind of like a shoe guy now.
Right, you are a shoe guy, and you did like
bell bottoms.
What would give most people like total anxiety is you took your brand new pair of shoes, you walked right down the gravel and hopped in the dirty creek in the middle of February with your brand new shoes on.
No, I didn't. I used some old ones.
Oh, you did use the older pair.
Yeah.
Okay,
some Innovates that I had that are a little bit
okay,
lower.
I could have sworn you went down there and like your brand new ones. I was like, man, he has lost his mind. He bought a brand new pair of shoes just for the polar plunge.
Come on, it's like when you get a new baseball glove, you got to throw it in water and you got to beat it up.
Yeah, you
and,
could put a little oil in there. You got to beat it.
It's
or
weird,
or the old school baseball caps. You can't wear like a fresh baseball cap back in the day. Now it's like everyone wants to keep their baseball caps like perfect with like the freaking tags on. Back in the day, as soon as we got it, dishwasher, put it on the first rack, wash it a little bit, crumble it up. You got to bend the bill. Now, like if you have a bent bill these days, it's like you people think you're like from the backwoods in like some southern state.
Exactly.
Everyone's got a flat bill that's like they freaking iron. I'm like, what happened to the curved bill? Hey, curved bill for life. Okay, you're never gonna see me in a flat bill. Back in the day, you wanted it all. You wanted all about like looking as old as you possibly could, and now it's about fresh, clean, flat.
I know. I would like to say, Jeremy told me that I need to wash my head, and it was like one little speck of dirt on the bill, and I'm like, dude, back in the day, you would never. Yeah.
You washed it as soon as you got it to make it look like it was
right,
dirty.
and then you wore it.
And
this is my favorite hat. That was the thing, right? This is my hat. You wear it all the time.
Yeah, I would take it immediately. I would put a rubber band, the appropriate amount of rubber bands, the tightness around the bill to get it nice and bent. Okay,
while it was still
wet, and it was still wet, and I put it in the dishwasher on the top rack through a hard cycle, like the hot cycle.
Beat it up, man.
Yep, beat up, and then I'd take all the pair of pants that I had, and I put it in the dryer, and then I put my hat in there and just wear it out. So it came basically. I'd buy it brand new, and it would come back out looking like it was already like kind of worn. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. I want my nice worn hat. I don't want it to look brand new. I want to have the bill perfectly curved. And now it's like you buy a brand new hat and you wear it and you keep the bill perfectly flat. You keep the tag on occasionally. And then when you're done with it, you put it in like a special place in your closet because like you're afraid to have like any kind of, character build on your hat. I feel like I'm not a fan of that.
Okay.
It's
got the title. It's called hat maintenance.
It's called
hat maintenance.
Listen, if you're my age, I'm going to pull that card. If you're my age, you know what I'm talking about. Well, at least you should. That's what you did to hats back in the day. Same thing with jeans. Now people pay for jeans with holes in them already, like to make them look like you've worn them. Like it's absolutely insane to me. But no, I don't have a title, but I did have, I guess, somewhat of a topic just because it was on my mind from yesterday and just even I think last night is yesterday for our Zoom call. I decided to go through and talk about, because I think a lot of athletes struggle with this. I think a lot of it goes, and we'll hopefully dig into it here in a little bit, but I think a lot of athletes struggle with questioning themselves if they're going hard enough, if they are suffering enough, if they can go the next level. Because, let's be honest, you can have all the fitness in the world. You can work really hard in training. You can be super, super consistent. But when it comes to like hard sessions and when it comes to race day, if you really, really want to push the needle and empty the tank and figure out exactly how much you have to be willing to go to that extra level of discomfort, right? And I think pain is oftentimes too dramatic of a word, because if you think about it, it's like we hear pain and we think like scary, right? We think like this is something that we need. We're in danger. Our safety isn't. We don't have feeling safe. Something bad's gonna happen when you hear the word pain. And a lot of times it's just annoying discomfort. Like we just don't like it, right? And now like in the day and age we live in, like we spend all kinds of dollars on making us feel as safe as possible, as secure as possible, and as comfortable as possible. And so when it comes to like training and doing things that push ourselves, a lot of athletes struggle with, I think, questioning if they're going hard enough, and then experimenting with like positive ways to push that. And I went through that in a Zoom call yesterday, just about things that I've seen from myself as a coach over the last 15 years, and obviously myself as an athlete, how I've kind of progressed in the way I've handled it, but then also what I've seen from athletes over the last 10 or 15 years has kind of changed. But then also I think one of the bigger questions that I asked each athlete was, and I think it wasn't a unanimous vote, but I think it was like everybody but two people. I said, when you look back at your life, right, and you look at the most painful experiences in your life that you've ever gone through, right, almost no one would raise their hand and say, yeah, that was physical. It was a workout. Like, yeah, if you've broken your leg and like you couldn't go to the hospital for 48 hours, whatever. Yeah, that'd probably be up there. But almost every single person raised their hand when I said, would you raise your hand if the most painful thing you can ever remember in your life was mental or physical, or excuse me, was mental or emotional?
Emotional, yeah.
Almost every single person raised their hands like, well, no brainer. The most painful thing or the most painful period of life that you've gone through, it's all been something that's been something mental and emotional, whether it's a traumatic event, or it was a depressing time, whether it was a loss of someone close. That's been the most painful. And I think when you categorize them into like the pain that you can endure that you had before, and what's really sticks out in you to the pain that we associate with workouts, that we associate with numbers, they are like total ends of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And so I asked them kind of go through that. And then the other part of it, I think, and I kind of ended the Zoom call with this, was that a lot of athletes will mention this in Training Peaks. I think a lot of triathletes, type A people who are never satisfied, perfectionists, whatever it is, like they always question if they're good enough, if they are fast enough, if they can go long enough, if they're trying hard enough, are they putting forth the right amount of effort? And a lot of times they'll mention like, I just don't know if I dug deep enough. Right. And so the way I kind of ended it was like, I think the most, cause pain is relevant, right? Like I think we love to compare everything, but my 8 on a scale of 10 might be your 6, right? You might have a higher pain, but we're never going to know. Right. It's something it's almost impossible to gauge, although we want to compare that. It's like I mentioned this yesterday, but one of my biggest pet peeves of watching any sporting event is when a commentator who's sitting in their cushy ass booth with air conditioning and a suit and tie is like, yep, they just don't look like they're giving it all. He can probably go back into play. He's probably not. And like, who the hell are you to like question someone's like, that's stuff like just chaps me. Great point. And so when I asked him, I said, well, if the first question you should ask yourself is, when you say, I wonder if I push myself hard enough, the first question you ask is, why do I feel that way? Because I think a lot of people struggle with assuming that they should always be able to dig deeper. And again, like I'm not going to like do spoiler alert and ruin the whole entire topic here, but a lot of things I said too were like, I think a lot of athletes get into the sport trying to figure something out about themselves. And we've all gone through like traumatic life experiences. And I think a lot of times when you go through something really, really, really hard in life, especially if it's a mental and emotional thing, then you have kind of shown yourself that you're like, I can kind of put up with a lot. Like I'm a resilient person. Like I can handle a lot. And then you hop in a training session and you get, a 4x18 best average. And you're like, I crumbled like a dead flower, and you're like, I shouldn't be doing this. Right. Because if we're honest with ourselves, we choose to quit. We choose to walk. We choose to step away. Rarely, if ever, does our body basically, do we push ourselves mentally to the point to where our body basically says, we're waving the white flag, we've got to stop, you're walking whether you want to or not, because you're like, I'm going to keep pushing through, and your body's like, no, we're shutting down. It's almost always you. You choose to slow down. You choose to stop the interval. You choose to coast. You choose to get out of the pool. We make that choice, and I think the toughest question is why do we make those choices? What is it that we're so scared of? And how can we do sessions or do especially races and push ourselves to figure out exactly, are we really truly squeezing the most we can out of ourselves, or are we protecting just kind of cruising through because at least we know we completed it, but we're never really finding that edge of, was that really all I had today, or was it the safe zone to be able to finish and at least say that I completed it?
Mm-hmm. Dude, I think this is a great topic. I've been thinking about this kind of stuff a lot lately, especially coaching more. And, I think a lot of athletes, including myself or whatever, we want to craft the perfect training plan that's going to make everything just, work out on the race day. And it's just going to be like, everything's just going to be done and taken care of, whatever. But I think we forget along the way, like we had a guy in here, David, yesterday, who did the hub experience, right? And we went through and we did the swim and everything, but we got on the bike and we did a little test, FTP test. And I think that was sort of a newer experience for him. And, whenever you do that, of course, you have to think about, okay, how am I going to get the most out of these 20 minutes, that strategy, whatever. And then, some people are really good at that type of stuff because they've experienced it more and have a better feeling for what they have. But I think everyone will always have doubts about that, right? Did I start too slow? Did I start too fast? All these kind of things. But for me, the win here, and this goes on throughout training, are those times when we sort of ignite that next level in ourselves. Because I think you have to sort of mentally push that, because you don't know sometimes. Like as I go into these races, like I think you have to be able to recruit that ability in yourself. And like, if you do a training plan from now on through September and you're doing an Ironman and you're consistent and you stay basically with it, right? Like, to me, the difference maker a lot of times is if you have that good base and you're in good shape, there's no fear really about finishing the race. There shouldn't be. But how many times throughout the training cycle did you kind of flirt with those different areas where that pain kind of crept in, and do you understand it and have your arms wrapped around this idea of like, okay, it's going to be okay? Because I think you have to be able to sort of tap into that or something. And I've been flirting around with this idea of like, man, I really feel like I'm only tapping like 70 or 80% of me, right? And then like certain things that you can change in your life, right, that might be able to just open a whole nother 10% or something like that, whether it's sleep or, consistent training schedules or whatever the case may be. But like to determine, how a bike ride in February is going to affect you in August is kind of a weird thing, there's a progression, but I think we have to sort of test ourselves along the way. And like you said, how far should you push it? That's a really good question. I think a lot of times, I guess what I'm getting at is I think when we get to these races, if we're in pretty good shape, even if we have more than we think we do sometimes. Like this weekend, I'd been running on a treadmill for like 2 weeks or so, and pretty consistently. And then we went to run camp. I had run 3 miles outside before that. And I went to run camp and I ran 30 miles in hills.
Yeah.
Over 3 days. And I felt pretty good. So it's like, what is that?
Right. And we mentioned that a little bit on this week's earlier podcast about, positive peer pressure. And like you went and going back to the David yesterday doing the hub experience. And like every athlete that we've had come in here that's done any kind of testing has blown their previous numbers out of the water. And that's not a like testing progression fitness thing. I mean, it is, but it's also the environment in which you're in, because, and this is something I touched on yesterday too, and it makes me sound like a grunt, but like the longer I've coached, the more I've seen athletes be totally detached from knowing what their body's capable of, because we were so obsessed with what our watch says and what so-and-so's heart rate is. And if my heart rate gets to this, I've got to stop because I'm in danger. And, or this heart rate, I can't hold it for this long, or this pace is too fast, or this watt range is too high. And then you just take all those things away and you just make them just like test their body and get to know it. And they're like, they absolutely blow it out of the water. And it's not that they don't know their body, it's that they just haven't given themselves the opportunity to learn about it, because we get so obsessed with controlled environments and doing these things that we just kind of control and adapt our own selves to what we're comfortable with. And I think that's true for a lot of athletes. Like, and I've seen a lot of athletes like this in the past. Like you're not pushing yourself. You're just comfortable with the amount of effort you have to put in each week. You don't want to change things up. You don't want to get, uncomfortable and, pushing us. You want to be able to control. I know this isn't going to feel good, but I only want to know it's only going to feel good for 30 seconds. I don't really want to know what it's going to feel like for the rest, because at least I can mentally prepare for that. When it comes to pacing, when it comes to strategy, when it comes to execution, it has we have just continued to like train and breed a type of athlete that goes into races. And I get it. And I mentioned this again yesterday that like I 100% get the safe bet race, right? Like if it's your very, very first Ironman or 70.3 or whatever it is, and you're just worried about covering the distance, you're probably going to play your cards a little bit different, right? You're going to play it close to the vest because finishing is the ultimate goal. Okay. But that conversation aside, once you've completed that and now you're obsessed with getting better, so many athletes go into a race with these high expectations that they want to get better, they want to PR, they want to push themselves to the limit, but they don't because they've already set their limit. They set their limit with the time. And once they've seen themselves, I got out of the swim, I got on the bike, I'm way ahead of schedule. I can just kind of cruise my way to, a 5:30, which will crush my PR. And they kind of rein it back in the last 3 or 4 miles. And then as soon as they get down, they're like, yeah, I think I could have then why didn't you? Like what? I guess the question is what the hell do you have to lose, right? We're not winning anything. Only one person's going to win the race. And if you're trying to win the race, you know what you're doing? You're absolutely going for it the entire because all you care about is winning, right? Everyone else is the, second, third, fourth, and so on and so on. What do we have to lose? We become so terrified with finding our own limit because we are obsessed with the seeing how visible it is to everyone else in terms of, I completed it because God, like what's everyone going to think if I run so hard and then at mile 10, I'm having the best day of my life. And then the last 2 or 3 miles, I just absolutely fall apart. What's that going to look like to people? What's it going to think? But you know what I can do? I can kind of rein it back in and just kind of chill and really take it easy and come in at a safe place and complete. And I'll look like it. But what did we figure out? That we've gotten some pretty good fitness, but that you kind of undercooked it because you were afraid to push that needle. And that's why I think it's you don't want to do it so much in training, but that's why I think that's why it is so hard to do in races is because we put so many expectations and we put so much stock in the hoopla that is a race that everyone has to see, that everyone gets to notice, that we put all over social media, that anything less, but it's not anything less than our best. It's anything less than the production of it is not going to work for me today. But is it like, when was the last time you did a session, or did a training session in a race and you emptied it and you went so hard and you thought that was 100% all that I had today? And again, I'm not advocating doing this every single day, right? Or even once a week. But at some point, we have to kind of learn. Yeah,
you got to flirt with it.
Yeah, but what you have to figure out is, does my mind even have any idea what it's talking about, right? What conversation, are my mind and body really in sync, or is one of them saying one thing, and is your mind saying one thing and body saying another? Like we had a question yesterday, Ross said, well, how do you know, right? And so a great example would be you do, say you do 10 by 1 minute, like all out intervals, right? On 90 seconds rest or something. And you get to the 10th and you absolutely go as hard as you think you can go. And then your interval's done. You've completed the set, you've completed the workout. And then for the very, very last one, you do a bonus and you think, all right, I felt like, and I told myself that maybe 320 watts was the best I had to give right now. Well, then rest 90 seconds and find out. And see if you had 350, right, or 360, or go for broke and figure out what did I actually have. And I just think it's a good, experiment to do in terms of finding out like what signal is our brain telling us? Is it telling us that we're in danger, right? No, rarely ever is your brain like you have to stop. You're in danger. Your body is going to shut down or collapse or whatever. No, it's usually I don't really want to do this for much longer. I just don't feel like it. It's a mental thing. You decide to stop, and I think that's like the hardest thing for us to kind of accept is that we like to put the blame on our body when it's rarely ever the case. It's usually our mind. We see it again, like at mile, you see more people walking mile 20 to 24 of the marathon than you do 24 to the finish, because everybody takes a break to walk because they just can't do it anymore. Then all of a sudden they see the finish line. They're like, oh, I got a little pep in my step. Like, actually, you know what? I got a 4:40 in me to run to the finish line. You're like, wait a minute. But a minute ago, I was telling my friends that I had burned a match and I had nothing left to give. Yet I found more to give. So who is it? And I think that's a responsibility that we don't like having as athletes because we can't blame our body. As a different person, we have to take that responsibility ourselves. And I know there's plenty of people listening to this podcast that have raced and felt good about it. But then when you laid your head down at night, the night after the race, and you thought, why did you stop? Why did you, not maybe why did you quit? But why did I decide to just like play it safe? Why didn't I just push, why couldn't I find the courage to do that? What was I so afraid of? Was I so afraid that my body was really going to give out? Or was I just afraid of feeling this kind of, uncomfortability or pain, however you want to put it, for another extended 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes? And I think that's a skill you have to work on, and I don't think it's a skill you can master by only going by numbers all the time, because you won't always be a number. You'll be something different every single day based on the stress you're in, because you have athletes who will say, man, coach, physically today, I had it, but mentally and emotionally, I had nothing to give. So you couldn't, and that's the thing, like your body, physically, that conversation has to sync well and have a very, great relationship with it, where you are mentally and emotionally, because they have to click at the same time. Because if you don't have it mentally and emotionally, you're not going to be able to push your body to the next level. The same thing goes with, if you're physically feeling terrible and your body and your mind is like, I got it today, but you're like, my legs won't fly. It's you have to have it all collectively together. So I think it's a hard thing to accomplish, but I think it's something you can practice with skill and pushing those boundaries longer and longer and longer. And then understanding that, what do you have to lose? Like, what are you losing by finding that out and going for it? Or who are you really going to disappoint, and what are you so scared of?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we make a snap decision instead of letting something play out. It goes back to one of our favorite lines is like, don't, believe anything you feel at this particular moment, because it's going to change, like during a race. I love that example of the 10 all outs and then doing another one to see what you had, right? And it's like, that's all I had. But what if that was 15 all outs, on the day before you even started, you're like, oh, 15. Okay. So 15's all I have today, but maybe you got 16 and you can push it up. And, I always talk about this, let go. How do you let go of those restrictions? It's sort of like we always have this kind of like, I think, natural reins on ourselves, like the protective sort of, no, we don't want to go down that road. It's just like it's this thing that is built into humanity, the safety clicker on. So it's like kind of like, how do you experience not being in control? Letting go. Just letting go and just seeing what happens, because we always want to articulate that thing. And that's what I think maybe like at the core of that, what is it, ERG mode we talk about? It's like, that's like a controller, man. So it's like, how do you snap? What if you want to snap out of that? It's like, I think it's a good idea to kind of experience that and see what the deal really is, because that connection between your mental attitude and your physical ability has to be honed, and you have to be able to because you're right. I think when you have a different attitude, you can kind of just summons up more energy. It's like, you wake up and something good happens in the morning. It's just like, wow, man, I feel lighter today. I feel like I got a little more energy. And that kind of stuff is so important to be able to tap as you're going in a race. And I was thinking about, I think last time we talked about, or I brought up this concept of in-race recovery or in-event recovery. And we talk about how, I'm always amazed at that, because I never was an endurance athlete, but the idea of actually being out on, let's say, a 10-mile run or whatever, like this weekend, that 14 we did, and there were sections where, I actually would start walking up a hill and kind of relaxing a little bit, and just saying, okay, don't go fast right now, just kind of recover, and you get to the top of the hill. And by the time I got to the top and I came down, I felt different, you have abilities to sort of and I think that, I think about this all the time in my Ironman runs. It's like, if, and I've said, don't walk. That was my infamous quote. And I think I'm coming around on that a little bit, because especially on the second loop, I think a lot of times I may have benefited maybe early on in that second loop of instilling sort of a walk, run kind of regiment, where it was giving my body a little bit of a break, changing the gait, muscle recovery opportunities, rather than just same move for 2 hours. And I think there's a lot of power in doing stuff like that. And then also when you talk about pain, like it's manufactured a lot of times in the brain, it's sort of like that mechanism triggers up. And I'm a big person about like, whenever that stuff happens and I'm on a bike, a trainer ride or something like that, and I'm like, man, this is just killing me. But when you can settle in with your breath and just like get into that moment specifically without thinking about maybe what's going to happen later, all that kind of stuff. If you can just breathe your way through it, I think there's a lot of power in that, man. And you can I do that a lot when I was riding out at the lab and stuff like that. I would just sync up with your breath, and especially your exhale, because it allows you to relax, and then you're like just one with your body, and you can it's amazing how much, if you're in that moment and you're breathing well, how you don't start, you kind of forget that you're in pain. You just sort of like are there. You're just like one with that whole situation, and you can let it go. And that's when you start discovering how incredible it is. Because like it says, I started running early on in my 50, or when I was almost 50. I didn't understand like how can anybody run that far? It just seems so weird to me. But I think a lot of that is stuff we accumulate and assimilate over time. This idea of like just being at a pace, being in that moment, being comfortable with that breath, and just keep going. Just trust it,
and just see. Right. I think that's the thing. Like when athletes because in my experience, like most athletes have a hard time executing really good tempo or negative split workouts because they're longer. They're not, oh, I can handle this for 4 minutes. Right. I can go all out. I can wrap my brain around that. It's those long intervals. It's like just on the edge of, lactate, where you're like, I can probably do this for like an hour. And you're like, but good God, do I want to? It's like, cause it's that happy medium of like, it's like, I think it's a perfect balance and relationship of the mental focus, emotional investment, and physical ask, right? It is because it's a long period of time. If you're asking your body to do something for 2 minutes or 4 minutes, you can almost always go on just like autopilot and just think, all right, I'm going to see what my body has for 6 minutes. It's a very short period of time. I can at least do it for 6. But when you think about doing it for 45 minutes or an hour, you're like, dear God, like that's a long time. Mm-hmm. Do I have the mental focus to continue or the experience to just continuously ask my body, keep going, push harder. We got more to go. Do you have more to go? I think you do. Let's push the needle some, because you're like, I don't really know that I want to keep doing this for that long a period. And that was like the conversation that I had when I ended up doing, because I didn't set out to do a 60-minute like FTP test. It's like way back in October. I just kind of stumbled into it not on accident, but I was in a great mental and emotional place, and I had 40 minutes of intervals, and I went through 30, and I had an interval coming up, and I decided to skip it. And I thought, I wonder if I can just keep going. And then and I kind of broke it up into 5-minute increments. And I thought, all right, I can do 5 more minutes. Push it a little bit, and I got done with the 5, and I was like, I can do 5 more, I think. Yeah. Push it a little bit more, and I got to a point of 40, and I was like, this is uncomfortable, but like I feel like I can. But once I got over like the 50% of time, right? I'm at 40 minutes. I've already done 40. All I have is 20 left, and I thought, I've withstood it for 40. I can. And all of a sudden, it doesn't seem like that. Like I wasn't watching anything. I was just listening to music, and I was like, I think I can probably squeak out 20, at least 50. And you kind of bargain with yourself and like, I can at least do 50. So now I've cut it half. Like now I've given myself an out. And I'm like, all right, let me just bump it up some. I went and bumped it up for 5 minutes. I was like, oh hell, now you're at 45. Like you might as well just go 60. Like now you're there and you're like, I got the home, you've done it. You're already, well beyond what you thought you could do. And then it was, all right, 5 more. And then you kind of tell yourself, all right, I've only got 10 left. So I can do anything for 10 minutes. I can do, if you break it down, it's like, I can do 1 minute 10 times, done. I can 100% do that. And if you break it down like that, it does seem more, almost appealing. You're like, I can definitely do that. Like you give yourself confidence, not like, 10 minutes of suffering. I don't know if I can make it 10. You're like, I can do 1 minute 10 times. Little things like that are like, I think, little tricks you can use. And I was like, all right, once I get to 50, I'm just going to start to progressively bury myself until I just can't do it any longer. And then, of course, when you get to like 4 minutes left, you're like, it's 4 minutes. What can I not do for 4 minutes?
Right.
Like, yeah. And so if you break yourself and you continue to ask yourself, like, do you have more? I think. But a lot of times you don't want to answer that question because the answer is almost always, well, yeah, you got more. But you want to say, nah, no, you don't, because it gives you that immediate out, right? And then you're like, I paced it well, I may have had more to give, but it's better to play it safe than sorry, and I had, that's where I need to be today. And while that's more oftentimes the case, there are times where you have to just say, I just want to see what, but in order to get to that point to make it a productive session, you have to let it last long enough to where you're at least getting some good, feedback. But bravo to those of you who go out and decide. Again, I used the word fail yesterday. I wish I could figure out another word to use. It's not failing a workout, right? You just went for it because you figured out something about yourself where your line was. And I guarantee you the line you found was much farther down the road of pain than you thought it was before. And now when you know those feelings, you think, I can hold this for longer. And that's the way I think every athlete that you talk to, for the most part, you ask them their best executed race. Yes, they will have paced it correctly because it is about pacing, but they will say, I got to that point to where I knew I had nothing left. Like I wasn't in danger, but I knew that I couldn't ask my body to go faster, so the pain couldn't get any worse. Because that's the question you ask is like, is it going to hurt any worse? No. The end result's going to be the same. The pain is going to go away. But I've already gotten to where the pain is so significant that it's not going to get worse. I just have to ask myself, am I okay with this for a little while longer? The answer is usually yes, because you're going to be able to handle it. It's not, I guess the best example I can give is that, because when you look at the numbers for when people get heat exhaustion or have heat stroke, it's not never, but the highest percentage of athletes that suffer heat stroke or heat exhaustion is in a 5K or a 10K. It's not in a half marathon, it's in a full marathon, because what happens is they don't give their body enough time to sync itself, right? They just go balls out from the beginning, and by the time their brain and their body understand what's going on, it's too late. In a half marathon, a marathon, you pace it so much to where you get these small, signals to where you're like, oh, I can interpret this as, okay, I need to slow down. Like this could get bad. This could get, really, really bad for me if I don't slow down and take care of myself, cool myself. Whereas in a 5K or a 10K, you go so fast and you kind of get, it's the same thing as eating, right? You're like, if you eat so fast, you're always going to overeat because you have your brain and your stomach hasn't had time to have this conversation. Like, hey, dude, you're full. You've eaten so quickly that if you eat slower, then it's going to be like, hey, this is meant, I'm satisfied, I'm full, I've had enough. And so when you look at it from a pain standpoint, that's why I think it's easier for athletes to blow up after like a minute, 4 minutes, 8 minutes, is because you don't have that time to have that good enough conversation to get a feel for, is this pain I'm about to stop pain, or is this just me being uncomfortable? So if you practice like going, again, all the way from the beginning, all the way to the end, short intervals, long intervals, the longer intervals, however, are the ones they're gonna set you up best for race day in terms of like figuring out, do I have it today? Now I do have it today. Do I want to have it today? Because I think that's ultimately the question, is you have to mentally and emotionally be in a space where, you know what, I can't accept this level, because once it's that painful, then you can hold it for like so much longer than you think you can. It's just, do you want to, right? And I think that's the hardest question we have to ask. And I think the one that we ultimately, many of us don't want the responsibility for answering, is because you're like, I felt my body doing this. And it's like, was your body sending you signals that it was done? No, it was still running. It was still, but I wasn't hot. I wasn't, having chills. Like it wasn't cramping. So the answer is like, I just didn't want to do it anymore. And we hate having to give that answer.
Yeah. I do think that pushing it like that and understanding that is a learned skill in some levels. Like what you said about your FTP test and how that went from 20 to 30 to 50 to an hour. Like all those 1 more minutes and all those 5 more minutes and those types of things, all those 1 more mailboxes, all those 1 more aid stations.
1 more hill.
1 more hills. Those are the learning experience, right? Like you that's something that I always talk about, like back when I used to play softball in this, we'd travel around in these tournaments, and some days we would lose like an early game and it's double elimination. So like on the Sunday, you'd end up having, if you kept winning, you might play like 7 or 8 games on a day, and everybody loves softball, whatever. But like that's running in and out of the dugout. And then you sit down. You know how it is when you sit down after
over.
It's over. And every
like
single
pickup basketball
one more
game.
inning, and we, like whatever that is, 70 innings, 70 get up off and run back out to the field, run back in, and your legs are just cooked. And I always talk about how I felt like that is one of the best things I've ever learned for endurance is like, do you want to? No, but how do you get through that? You just find a way. You just keep finding a way. So you go through those experiences, and I think that has really been, in a lot of ways, at the core of how I get through Ironman marathons. It's like this, just pick it up, man. Pick up one foot and put it down, and just keep doing that and keep doing it. And like that's the thing, with on the bike, like how you were doing it is like, I was going to ask because you got to 60 and you think, could you have done one more minute? Of course you could have.
Well, I actually ended up doing that. I actually ended up doing, all right, once I got to 60 and completing it, what I said was, well, the ultimate goal here was to get your best 60 minutes. So just now empty the tank until your legs can't move anymore. And so I think I went for like 40 something more seconds, but that was it.
But it wasn't, to me, that's not even about what happened there. It was about all those little things, all those little times when you just sucked it up one more time. How do I get it up one more time and just go and push through this, and you push through it and then you learn, you're like, man, I'm capable of like a lot more than I think sometimes, and I think that we do that all the time. I love when we talk about like those days of the heavy drinking back in the day and how like you felt like shit and you'd get up and you'd have to go do something like that kind of stuff. It's like, hate to say it, but man, it's like, those sometimes it's really difficult to get moving after a night like that or whatever. And just to keep going. And like, I apply it to my job, my old corporate world. I just hated getting up and going in there, but man, I just kept doing it. I kept putting on that tie and I'd go and like, while I guess you always look back and it's like, what did you learn and what kind of experiences did you gain? You can't regret it or do any of that kind of stuff, but it's like, I do think that those are toughening lessons or however you want to call it. It's like, you keep going into the fire, so to speak, and it usually works out. It's one of those things where you get there and it's like, why did I, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be when I was going through this. But
we've talked about this at length on many a podcast, is that I think it's a really interesting, I'm sure there's some kind of science behind it. And I know it's from personal experience, I'm sure you do too, but the relationship we have to dig deep with physical pain and the relationship it has to where we are and what we're going through mentally and emotionally. Because I will tell you, because to me, it's like I end up on two ends of the spectrum. The greatest workouts I've ever had have been when I've either been in the best place I've ever been or the worst place I've ever been.
Yeah.
Rarely ever in between. If I'm having like a meh day, my workouts are usually meh. They're kind of just, which is fine. Some of the best workouts I've ever had has been that I've been so confident and so like jazzed up that they've just been incredible. But then the workouts that I end up being like almost the most proud of, where I've dug the deepest or I've done something I'm like, how in the hell did you do that? Especially going back to my drinking days. Like I signed up for the 10 mile swim the suck last year, or this coming year. 10 mile swim race. The only time I've ever done it was when I was like a month out from going to rehab, and somebody was like, "Oh, what was your time last?" I was like, "Well, 3:46," and I was drunk. And I was like, I was still like so hungover from the night before, and so you think about that, and you're like, how, like what, like how did I even like was able to do? But I think there's a direct relationship in the amount of emotional and mental pain that you're in. That you oftentimes, I think most people would agree, because you see people say this in training. It's like, I had a really bad day, I just had to go after it today. Like we want to, again, like we talk, it's like your pressure point to an extent. You're hurting and it's like, I've got a really bad headache. Well, let me just grab the space in between your thumb and your finger and press it here, and you've got the pain there, and all of a sudden your headache goes away. And I think that's such a fascinating, probably discussion for another day, but just an exploration we can do of ourselves. And like when we are really hurting mentally and emotionally, the pain we feel has almost kind of been dull. It's been like,
I was gonna say numb.
It's been numbed. It's been minimized. The impact that it has on us becomes so much less, because again, going back to the very beginning of the podcast, when I said, if you had to think, all right, what's the most painful experience you've ever had in your entire life? I wouldn't be able to name anything physical, even in like my top 50. Right. And so if you look at that in terms of what you've been able to endure and what you've gone through and how painful that was, then if you're going through and having that conversation, trying to work through two or three really, really bad or challenging, painful things at one time, mentally and emotionally, and then also physically, the mental and emotional toll is going to be so much heavier and weigh so much more and feel so much more painful that the physical pain, you're going to be like, dude, what is that? Like it's like a gnat, like an annoying little gnat. You're like, this isn't going to feel excruciating. Okay, then of course, 10 days before that, if you'd been a great mental spot or just kind of mandate, you're like, oh my God, it's like someone's hammering a nail through my hand, right? It's like, it's just that feeling of burying yourself to, I think, kind of compensate and feel something different than the excruciating pain that you're in. So I think if you explore that, and the way to maybe do it in a positive way is like, it should give you the confidence, I think, to know that you can do more, right? You don't want to do it under the guise of, well, okay, well, I'm only able to really push myself to the limit when I'm in a terrible place. We don't want that, right? We want you to be in a wonderful, great place and be able to push it. And I think some athletes too, I think, and myself included in this, is that you've been through so many hard things in life. You've been through so many challenges. You've made it through so many obstacles in life that have been gut-wrenching and heartbreaking and, traumatic to an extent. And you've made it through those, yet when you find yourself questioning if you have more to give in a training session, you're like, dude, what is wrong with you? What do you mean you can't take more? Hello? Have you looked at your, the past? Have you looked through the things you've been through in life? You know you can, so why can't you right now? And it goes back to, I think, what you were mentioning a couple minutes ago in surf, of like, you're always going to go to self-preservation, right? Safety. Take care of yourself, right? None of us, most people have that trigger of like, okay, it's time to stop. I need to take care of myself. Our body's like, hello, I want to be around for a while longer. Take care of yourself. But that's also self-preservation in a different way when it comes to the amount of mental and emotional damage and pain that we can endure, because what you want to do is you want to endure it. Because if you don't, then you find yourself in that really difficult, awful place of thinking about not wanting to live anymore, right? To not being, which you don't ever want to have, right? And so I think your mind is like, no, we can handle this. We can get through this. We can manage, because we want to be here. Like, we want to be around. And so it's a different type of self-preservation, right? Versus where your body's like, no, hello, like I want to be living. Let's stop and walk. Whereas with life, we can't just turn life off. We have to endure it. We have to wade our way through the most challenging periods of our life. We have to continue on. We can't just be like, all right, life, no more stress, no more jobs, no more relationships, no more bad things. I'm just going to, live on the beach and everything's gonna be hunky-dory. We can't make that decision, right? But we can make that decision with our body and play it that way. And I think that's at the crux of it, why it's so hard sometimes for us to push ourselves that limit, because in other areas of our lives, it might be so difficult and so hard. We're like, well, I want to be able to control the shut off, because in life, I can't necessarily always turn it off. So give me some control and let me turn it off when I want to.
Yeah. I was watching some things this morning, and I wrote down a quote, or it wasn't a quote, it was sort of a thought about some things that says, how many things have we cut short in our lives because we couldn't handle the first few minutes or an uncomfortable beginning? And it reminded me of, how it relates to triathlon. My first two Olympics, my first one, I got anxiety, at a kayak within 100 yards or 200 yards. I had to hang on that thing. And I always talk about that as a turning point in my career, actually, because if I hadn't just kind of like sat there and got my breath or whatever and just turned away and walked out, the walk of shame out of the water, I may not be here, right? But I let my breath kind of take over. And then the next one, of course, was the one you came to, where it was 53 degree water.
Coldest race I've ever, still to this day, that I've ever spectated or been at. Even colder than Louisville was that one year. It was like freezing cold in the morning. It was the coldest race I've ever been to. I think it was like 53 degree water, 55 air temp, pouring rain. Yep. All day long.
And it was basically my first race with you. And I think about what that felt like to jump in the water. And I mean, if I would have overthought that, I would have been done. Because the minute you stop, that's why I get into this, you got to be in your breath, because that's all I can do. I could only turn in there. I couldn't start thinking about any other things besides one more stroke, and just like breathing and relaxing and settling in, because that water is so cold. you have to be at one with it, and just kind of like the more you think about it, the colder it's going to get. So you just have to kind of cruise through it. But my thought is like, if I had stopped, I mean, at 200 yards or something again, and just was like, my God, this is cold. Out.
Done. You accepted it. It's done. It's
and that's
over.
just like the intervals you're talking about. It's all this stuff. You can't overthink it. You have to just go into it, lean into it. I talk about that with yoga all the time. It's like that pain. You just lean into it for 1 more minute, or 30 more seconds. That's the skill.
And there's I can't remember who it's called. It's Buddhism as well. It's like when you have anxiety or a fear or bad and negative thoughts, instead of ignoring them, I think the quote is like, I see you, and I'm going to keep on moving on. Like, you acknowledge instead of like, I'm going to ignore this for as long as possible, because then once you can't ignore it any longer, then it's just 20 times worse. Instead of like, yeah, I see you. Like, I understand this is a really anxious moment, or I feel really, really terrible, or I am afraid, and that's okay. Yeah, I'm going to keep going. It's like, I think we attach ourselves always to the one thing that has the least chance of happening. Right. And I do this, like, and I think athletes do this when they race or when they do training sessions, like, oh, well, but what if I have to walk, or what if I, have this terrible event, or what if I get a cramp? What if you always think, well, I've got control and all these good things are happening, but we always kind of make that giant leap to, but what if, the worst possible case scenario. Like, I do that because I'm absolutely terrified to fly, which is something I have to get over at some point. Terrified because obviously I jump to the thing and I'm like, I mean, of course, like I'm playing, like I'm gonna die. Like that's like what else is gonna happen? You get on a plane and you're gonna die, and that's what happens. But it's not. It's the opposite. Like, oh well, people, it's much more safer than driving cars. I'm like, tell that to me because I'm still here, baby. Like like I just have
that's
that
a control.
It's a total control issue. It's 100%. I recognize that, but it's the same thing when we were. Because it is a fear of mine when we were talking at Run Camp about the races you've most wanted to do in your life, or the one that you've kind of always thought about. And I mentioned the Catalina Channel Island swim, which swimming from Catalina Island to the shore. And it was the very first race that I thought about doing when I got out of treatment. Because the water's always been like my home, is a peaceful place, but it also scared the living hell out of me. And to be honest, at that point,
fear is your guide.
And at that point in my sobriety, I had a lot more other scary things going on. It's like, there's only so many scary things I can handle at one time. I'm going to put this on pause. And so we mentioned it I mentioned that as the race that I've kind of always had out there that I've really wanted to do, because it scares me, because it's a midnight start in the middle of the ocean. And everyone's first comments were not about the distance. It was like, dude, there are so many sharks out there. You're going to die. You leap to like the thing that's the least likely to happen, to navigate and steer your fear towards not doing it. And I was excited to talk about it. And then of course it was like sharks. And I kept thinking, they're kind of right. There are a lot of sharks out there. Maybe it's about it. You're like, this sounds like a great reason to not do it, but then it's like, we always, again, and that's where fear comes from. It's like the things that are least likely to happen. Like, we jump to that place of, but what are the chances of that happening? Like, what are the chances of this? What are the chances of me taking a flight to, wherever, and something bad happening? Like, they are less than me driving to my house, right? But that's the ultimate. And of course, my rationale is like, well, listen, if I'm going to fly anywhere, it's going to be flying over water, because I can fly over water. I'm good.
You're good. Yeah, I was going to say, you take a pontoon.
I can take a pontoon. 100%. I'm totally fine. Like, I can swim, right? And people are like, that's not how it works. When you go down the ocean, you still die. I'm like, well, there are sharks. Like, so it's like you jump to every single piece of like, well, what bad thing can happen? But me, I'm like, it's on water. I can probably survive.
So are you announcing today that you just signed up?
No.
Okay.
No,
right.
Not yet.
All right.
Not yet.
Take your time with that one, man.
I'm working on it. I mean, considering my current swim shape, I have a little bit of work to do.
Yeah, swim the suck will be a good.
Yeah, maybe 2022. You never know. I'll drive out there. I've made the trip from Tennessee to California before. I can do it again.
All right. Yeah,
because I can't overcome two things at once. That's way too much.
I know.
I'm not flying. You're not a big flyer either.
No.
Why aren't you a big flyer?
I don't know. Same probably thing.
You don't like it? I figured it was all the people you didn't know.
I don't really like it. Because all the people.
Yeah, all the people you didn't know and don't like.
No, I don't mind that.
Last time you've flown, if my memory serves, was to New York.
Is that true?
Shooting Banksy?
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah, when I was shooting
like 6 years
Saving
ago.
Banksy.
5,
No, it
6
wasn't
years
Saving Banksy, a different film, but yeah, flew in there. And I remember, there's again, it's like that day we took off, it was pouring rain. It was cloudy, like murky, the worst day ever. I couldn't even see like 100 yards down the runway. And I'm like, okay, dudes, I trust you here.
Trusting you.
It's like,
Jesus, take the wheel.
Yeah, 100% just flying off into this darkness basically. And I'm like,
Like, I'm not going to make it.
it's all, that's why, I mean, that's the thing though. Like I remember I was like, okay, breathe. And it was just like this, I just got into a meditation for like 2 hours, and that's like, it really calms you down. I mean,
Dude, I the last time I flew, because the weird thing is I've gone through periods of time where I've had zero fear. Like I flew out to Ironman, Arizona, was one of my best races ever by myself on a plane, had zero fear. I didn't drink either.
I was gonna say that's a good way to get.
No,
to
I
it.
didn't. No, I
Like,
didn't. I didn't drink either. No drinking. I mean, I was drinking back then. I drank the night
pound
before.
about 6 beers.
No, because I was too nervous to even drink.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, the last thing I need to do was go down a plane drunk, because I'm definitely going to hell. Like that was like that would have made a difference or anything. But I've had, like, I've flown to France before. Like I've had
the country.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I've made huge. It was in high school. But I've flown and not been nervous. But then there are some times where I landing, it's my jam. Okay, as soon as they're like, flight attendants prepare for arrival, I'm like, oh, sweet Jesus, thank you. That's made it.
Unless you're going into LaGuardia and it looks like you're going in the water.
No, right? I'm like, listen, it's a water. I can hang.
Yeah,
okay?
that's true.
And I don't care if it goes up and over. I'm like, I can hang with this. But yeah, and I know it's super safe, but it is. It's just like I've been through periods where I've had, where I've been totally cool with it, but right now I'm not cool with it. Like I'm not a cool flyer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because the more you do it, the more comfortable you get too. There was a time when
I was
flying
and the longer you stay away from it, the harder it's going to get for you to get back. And you're like, oh my God, like, can we start off with like, I want you to try a small plane. I'm like, no.
Small plane?
No, I don't want to hear the pilots talking about whatever's going on, because I want to know what's going on 24/7. So I was like, well, the great thing is if you're scared to fly, you can, get your pilot's license. I'm like, the hell I'm going to get that? Like, are you kidding me right now? Listen, if they told me tomorrow, hey, you can walk through security and wear a parachute, I'm in. I'm in. I'll do it. I'll hop on a plane. I'm like, yeah, just hop out,
Sit by the door, dude?
Yeah, just sit by the
but
door.
Then you're afraid the door's going to open.
No, I'm not afraid of that at all.
Oh, you're not?
Every man for themselves. Bye. See you later. Like, I'm out.
Yeah, I was thinking
Even if it's going,
mid-flight, and I'm sitting right there in like a seatbelt, like getting sucked, but not quite.
That'd be out the door, man. Of course, it's like, well, the airplane's gonna be going like 50 miles an hour. You're probably not gonna survive. I'm like, oh, I will. My parachute over water. Okay, I'm gonna land perfectly. And we'll land perfectly at the end of this podcast. Hope you enjoyed both Mike and I's fear of flying. I can't wait for all the emails and texts. Like, well, a great thing that I used to do to get over it. You know what? I'll get over it when I'm going to get over it, okay?
Yeah, but we hear about these pilots. They text now and they're on Facebook and shit while they're flying.
You want to know why? Because we work with a lot of them.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like asking,
Are
I'm
you
like,
afraid?
aren't you
I'm
on a
always
shift?
on my
Like, aren't you
phone.
flying? Yeah, I'm over Chicago right now. I'm like, I think we're about to land. I'm not really sure because we're on autopilot. I'm like, and this is why I don't fly, okay? Because I know you, okay?
Yeah,
If you're having to ask me if you can swap a 35-minute run with an easy bike, this is not the kind of decision making I want for a person in charge of my aircraft, okay? No, thank you. No, thank you. But we thank you for tuning in today and being a part of our podcast. If you haven't been or want to go back, hop on over. Our website is our one-stop shop for all things camps, coaching, and community. It's C26triathlon.com. We're still doing our coaching, our club membership right now, which is we're planning out your entire year. Dude, I'm telling you, races are going to start clicking off starting at the beginning of April, and they are going to roll. Be a part of that. You can scroll down 3, click on club membership, and read all the info about that and get a hold of Mike. He is in charge of that. He's also taking athletes right now for custom coaching. We've got camps opening up. We've got camps this summer. We've got a trail camp we just released in October. I'll probably put that in the main group that I haven't. But other than that, we have some analysis on there, hub visits. If you're interested in coming to the hub and getting one of the full experiences, we've had athletes come from all over. I mean, all over from California, from New Mexico, New York, and as soon as the border opens, from Canada. We had them from all over. If you want info on that or how to schedule your visit, you can email me directly, c26coach@gmail.com. If you have any questions or comments for Mike, you can get a hold of him at crushingiron@gmail.com.
Yeah. And also at the website, we have some really good gear for sale, a lot of new hats and visors in. So go check that out. And we're usually shipping next day or same day. So it's been good. Yeah. And if you're interested in me as your breathing coach,
yeah.
hit me up.
Yeah.
crushingiron@gmail.com.
If you need help on learning how to not fly, contact me at c26coach@gmail.com. I will walk you through the steps on how to be afraid of flying.
Yeah.
Like, these guys are awesome.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging around.
That's all we got.
We
No
got
fly zone,
that
baby.
stuff at the beginning,
Yep.
but we just don't. Bad.
Bad at flying.
Bad, we're good.
See you, dude.
See you, man.